Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Geezerology on YouTube. Happy Sunday. I'm Scott here in South Florida. Just for anybody who's wondering, I'm about 30 miles north and a little bit west of where the condo collapsed down in Surfside. So it's kind of in my backyard, and it's a terrible, terrible thing, but yep. But anyway, and up in Missouri, where we appear to be having another spike in coronavirus cases, we're just full of good news today.
Oh yeah.
Up in Missouri, and the west, on the west side is Bob, and on the east side is Dan. And we're going to talk about something fun today. That's all of the nasty talk we need to do.
It is going to be fun.
Yeah. Today we're going to talk about the Steppenwolf album from 1969, Monster. We're going to, we decided to do our next few albums are going to be things related in some way to Independence Day. So we're going to start off with a little history lesson from Steppenwolf from 1969. Before we go there though, Bob, what's in the news?
All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Stand by for news.
All right. Back in the days of ticker type.
Heard that sound from the old newsrooms? Those old AP teletype machines clattering away. All right. Well, I got several things today. Sadly, some of it's kind of gloomy, but you know, our classic rock musicians are starting to age out. So we've got some stories that kind of reflect that. But starting out with a little optimistic thing, Neil Young is back in the studio with Crazy Horse. And anytime that Neil and the Horse get together, we usually wind up with some pretty good rock and roll. So they're working on a follow-up album to their 2019 album, Colorado. And quoting Neil, Crazy Horse is back in the barn now, Young wrote on his website. Shaking off the rust. It's been a long time since we have been together, and more than a few tears have been shed. They're recording the LP in a barn in the mountains of Colorado, and the structure was modeled after a barn in the same spot that it collapsed. It's an exact replica of the original, Young said, built with ponderosa pines. It is magic inside. Let's see. Colorado, which came out in 2019, was Young's first album with Crazy Horse following the retirement of the band's longtime guitarist, Frank Pancho San Pedro, who was replaced by Nils Lofgren, E Street Band fame and some other things. And Lofgren has a long history with Young. He played on the After the Gold Rush album when he was only 19, and he also played on Crazy Horse's first solo LP. And then he also came back and played on Young's Tonight's the Night. So, again, quoting Neil, the music we are making is for our souls. It's like fresh water on a desert. Life is going on. So Neil is still going strong in his 70s.
Son of a gun. I just looked up on Wikipedia. Crazy Horse, and yeah, the members of Crazy Horse are Billy Talbot, Ralph Molina, and Nils Lofgren.
Yeah, the one Neil Young album I had many years ago, it might have been prior to even when I went down to Springfield, was after the gold. Was it After the Gold Rush? No, it's the album with Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. Mm-hmm. And one of his better rocking songs was Cinnamon Girl. Anyway,
that was one of his classic. That was Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. Cinnamon Girl, Down by the River.
Yeah, so this is good news.
Yes,
that's great news. That's great. I'm happy to hear that. That's great news. I've always been about Crazy Horse.
Yeah, and there's an interesting story about Lofgren hooking back up with them. Neil Young was going out on tour with Crazy Horse when San Pedro decided that he wouldn't tour. And so they called up Nils and said, hey, you want to join us? And Nils Lofgren got basically no warning and went out on tour with them. And Young even said, it doesn't matter, man, let's just go out and do it. So they didn't have any time to rehearse or practice or anything. And there's some YouTube videos of that tour, and they did a good job. So Nils Lofgren's a heck of a guitarist. So anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to when that hits the market.
But yeah, I can't wait to hear that. One of my favorite, one of my most memorable concerts was around 1990. It was when Neil was on his Neil and Crazy Horse. They had recorded the album in that barn. I think. Let's see. But anyway, they showed up at the Cap Center. It was an arena show. They showed up at the Capitol Center in Washington, D.C. That's when I was living in Northern Virginia. And it was a 3-act concert. Started off with Mike Neff's band. What was the name of his band?
Mike Nesmith?
Huh?
You say
No,
Mike
not Mike
Nesmith?
Mike Neff.
Mike Neff.
Social Distortion.
No,
Social
okay.
Distortion was the opening act. The second act was Sonic Youth, and then Neil Young and Crazy Horse on their feedback guitar blasting tour was were the headliner, and that was an ear bleeder. You walked out of the plane ears, and one of the people, I went with a group of people, about 4 or 5 people, and one guy was really upset because he thought he was going to a Neil Young show, and he's going to be hearing like Harvest,
Well, do you remember you and me catching Neil Young at Memorial Hall in KC?
Yeah, that was on the Freedom Tour, which we're going to talk about Freedom in a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yes. All right. Well, moving on. Bob Seger has announced that he doubts that he will tour again, and he's hinted that he's probably going to retire following the death of a longtime bandmate of his, saxophonist Alto Reed, who died in December after a battle with colon cancer. Seger recalled the last phone call he had with Reed, quoting, "I listened really hard to him, and he said how grateful I am for my wonderful life. I thought that was so beautiful, and I thought he was so brave. I don't think I could go out on tour without him." And apparently Reed was with Seger for something close to 50 years and played on quite a few of his albums, was with the Silver Bullet Band, and he has some of his notable contributions. He did the intro to Turn the Page and had a solo on Old Time Rock and Roll. So anyway, so Seger looks like he may be calling it quits now after that. Further on into the aging rocker category, David Crosby is saying that he's losing the ability to play guitar. Back in mid-2020, he said he was suffering from tendonitis, a condition where your tendon becomes inflamed following an injury, stiffness, joint pain, and it affects how the tendon moves. He told Rolling Stone then that he sought treatment, that it didn't work, and he said because of that he may never play guitar again. So recently he was on the Howard Stern show, and he said that he's at the end of my life, and that it's a very strange thing to be there. Quoting, "And here's what I've come to think about it. It's not how much time you got, because we really don't know." He said, "I could have 2 weeks, I could have 10 years. It's what you do with the time that you do have. And so I'm trying to really spend it well." He said that his health is generally good, but he has some issues such as the limited movement of his fingers. "I am losing my ability to play guitar. That's kind of tough," he said. "I got another year or so of being able to play, and I can teach my parts to somebody else if I really want to play that bad." He says, "I don't know if I'm going to play anymore," but he still says that he's making music, and he even has 2 records planned. He's got an upcoming album titled For Free that's coming out July 23rd.
Well, his most important instrument is his voice. It's like, if David Crosby says he's not going to be able to play guitar anymore, to me that's, it's like, yeah, so what? If David Crosby says that he's lost the use of his voice, to me that would be
or lost his ability to write music.
Right.
All right. Anyway, Roger Daltrey has canceled his tour over travel issues. Daltrey had announced a Live and Kicking U.S. solo tour, but he's now canceled the dates. It was supposed to start in August, but he said when he booked the show several months ago, he was pretty confident that things with the pandemic would be back to normal. But he said due to the uncertainty of the current travel situation and the challenges for people from the UK to be able to perform in the US, he's decided to cancel the shows. He plans to rebook them sometime in the future, and has apologized to those people who already bought tickets. And not to leave our brethren from the world of country music out, there was a recent massive country music festival in Kentucky that kind of got off on a rocky footing. Police found meth, marijuana, and an open bottle of alcohol in the first vehicle they stopped at a traffic checkpoint.
Oh, God.
One of the people in the car had 2 active warrants out for their arrest. And I love this quote. "We were like, well, this doesn't bode well for the weekend," said Edmonson County Sheriff Shane Doyle, in what has to be the understatement of the decade. Police said that by the end of the 5-day bash, dubbed the Redneck Rave, 1 man had been impaled, 1 woman had been strangled to the point of unconsciousness, and 1 throat had been slit. In all, authorities arrested 14 people and charged 4 dozen people from 5 states. The event was organized by a country rapper called Just in Time. Never heard of him.
Rapper?
Country rapper, yeah.
Wait, did you say country rapper?
Country rapper, yes.
Okay.
All right, I know.
That's news. That's news to me. I didn't.
Actually, apparently it's a thing, because
Yeah,
wasn't there
yes.
some big country rap hit a year or so ago
Oh, I don't know.
by somebody called Little Nas or something?
Is it where they do traditional rap lyrics over a banjo or steel guitar?
You got me, brother. It's not a genre that I'm into.
No. It sounds almost unholy, you know.
Doesn't it though?
The rural hip hop.
Yeah, but anyway, this festival took place at the Blue Holler Off-Road Park, and it reportedly drew a crowd of tens of thousands, and it doubled the population of the unincorporated town of Ollie, which was so small it doesn't even have a stoplight.
What state was this in?
Kentucky.
Kentucky. Okay.
Yeah. Promoters bragged they had sold more than 20,000 tickets, and they advertised it as the biggest country party you'll ever go to. And it boasted a demolition derby, of course, goldfish racing, and a full-scale football game, as well as concerts. And apparently at the 5-day event, 1 person slit a friend's throat, and he's still at large. A 29-year-old man had allegedly strangled a woman until she passed out. 1 person lost the better part of a finger, and another was impaled when he drove a side-by-side over a 2 to 3 inch log that broke through the bottom of the recreational vehicle. Paramedics left the log inside him as they airlifted him to a hospital.
God bless America.
So, and then the sheriff told the local newspaper that last year's Redneck Rave, they actually had 2 of them last year, overwhelmed his staff. So he ordered all deputies to work mandatory overtime. They had assistance from the Kentucky State Police. Apparently at least 1 person died at the event last year, and they've got another one scheduled for this October. Quoting the sheriff, "There were so many intoxicated people, we just decided if dispatch sends an ambulance in, we're sending a deputy in with them." So you know, you could attack rock and roll for its debauchery, but our country brethren certainly know how to get themselves in their share of trouble.
Yeah, they have their own agenda. No kidding.
Yeah. So I guess there was a lot of.
Do you know, were there any recognizable names who were bands, performers?
You know, the news story that I downloaded didn't list names of performers, so that I don't know. This one the story I saw just focused on what happened there. So,
okay.
But like I say, that country rapper, I had never heard of him before. No. Okay, let's see. Moving on.
I have one of. You have more?
Yeah, I've got one more.
Okay.
I think we're done. Okay. All right. And, earlier we were talking about the new Beatles Let It Be documentary coming out. Well, A&E is going to be airing a 4-hour documentary on Kiss. So in light of that documentary coming out, I have some information here from Kiss frontman Paul Stanley. And Stanley believes that Kiss could continue even when all of the original members are gone. And of course, the band is on their farewell end of the road tour, and which they think they're going to finish up sometime in late 2022. Original members Stanley and Gene Simmons are, in the lineup now. 2 of the original members are gone, and recently Stanley was quoted as saying, I think that recasting Kiss or Kiss 2.0 is not what we have ever talked about. Can Kiss continue and can it evolve without us in it? Well, yeah, because it's already 50% there. In other words, there was a time when people said, well, it can only be the original 4. And then it was, well, it can only be the original 3. Well, things move on and circumstances change. He added, could I see Kiss evolving with just different personnel? Yeah. As big a fan as I am of what I do, and I think I'm damn good, no ego here, there's other people around who could pick up the torch and bring something to the philosophy and to the live show and to the music. It would be Kiss. It wouldn't be Kiss 2.0. So my question is, if at some point in time they had taken all 4 original members out, found 4 guys with the same body shape, put them in makeup, would anybody have even known it? So, but
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I was thinking. That seems like if there could be such a thing as like a franchise rock band,
it would be
this could
Kiss.
be it because yeah, I mean, it's like if you saw them on stage, you wouldn't really know if it's a real deal or not, right?
Yeah, and
I mean,
nobody,
by sight, I guess if you're a real fan, you could tell if the voice was different or the guitar style was different or something like that. But I certainly wouldn't know that.
I wouldn't either because I'm not a Kiss fan, but
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting. And I give the guys in Kiss credit. They are fantastic at merchandising. So
Oh,
if
yeah,
anybody would,
Exactly. And I think that was all led by Gene Simmons.
yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah, Gene Simmons spent years like going on, had a reality show and going on. I remember him going on a Howard Stern show and doing a bunch of interviews where his basic reason for being in the public eye was to sell Kiss merch.
Yeah, and that's a huge revenue stream for them.
Yeah.
so I mean, I could literally see when these 2 original members finally call it quits that they would actually franchise more Kiss bands and send them out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, that's my news items for the week.
Okay, let me just add on a couple of quick ones. We don't have to go there, but aging rockers. Springsteen just started his Springsteen on Broadway show, and I guess they had to battle a small group of anti-vax protesters were there, because they were requiring people be vaccinated before they could get into the building. And and also, this is just something I learned yesterday. Speaking of documentaries, there's a new documentary out as a theatrical release called The Brothers Sparks.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember the band Sparks, but it was the 2 brothers, Russell and Ron Mayle. And I was, and I remember them from back in the early 70s, right? And because they had kind of a unique look and a unique sound, but as far as I knew, they went away. But I was quite shocked to learn yesterday that they have been a rather influential and continuing act since early 1974. I mean, they've continued to record, they've continued to go on tour, they've done film work, they've done this and that, and now somebody has done a documentary on the two brothers' lives. And the funny thing about it is, I wanted to learn a little bit more about them, but apparently these two brothers are very, very guarded with their private lives, and nobody knows anything about their private lives because they keep it hidden. You know, it's like they'll talk about their music, they'll talk about their careers, but they won't talk about their family, their private life. Nobody even knows if they're married. Nobody knows if they have children or whatever. Really, really interesting. I never, just Sparks is just kind of this band I remember from a couple videos back in the 70s, you know.
Yeah, I remember them. Never really paid a whole lot of attention to them.
Yeah. They're from California, but I always thought it was they were a European band. But it turns out that they've always been very successful in across the ocean, but never very successful in the United States. And they're being billed as, this documentary is billing them as your favorite band's favorite band. Sort of this Velvet Underground vibe going on there, you know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where they've been for all this time. I mean, when
they've
I
been
read
around
that little news item about it, I thought, gee, I didn't know they had still been, producing stuff. But I thought they were kind of quirky.
They were very quirky. Yeah.
Not a big fan, but I just thought, well, they have their lane, and
right.
More power to them. But
they were apparently for a long time got very big in the EDM lane, doing a lot of electronica. So anyway, do you have anything before we move on to Steppenwolf?
No, nothing concrete. I think we already talked about they're going to bring back Wrestling at the Chase, the famous hotel in St. Louis, and the founder of it is the former Smashing Pumpkins member, and so that's. I think we talked about that before. But
the manager of the hotel is a former Smashing Pumpkins member.
No, he is the leader of a parallel wrestling league. WWE is the big thing.
Right.
And apparently he watched this for a time. His family lived in the greater St. Louis area, and he's a big fan of it. And so they're attempting to bring it back, I think September. And that wrestling was considered at the Chase was a big deal. It's in a big formal room where they had wedding receptions, there's chandeliers, and people used to go there attended in their suits, and women with their diamonds, and then they'd throw beanbags at the wrestlers. But
I remember when I was a kid growing up in St. Louis. When I was a kid, every Friday night, our family would sit around. I think it was on Friday nights, like at 9 or 10 o'clock or something like that. We'd sit around the TV and watch Wrestling at the Chase. This is our first introduction to that sport or show or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
long before it became massively popular.
Exactly. The promoter was Sam Muchnick, and one of the ring announcers was Joe Garagiola. He did that, and then his brother Mickey Garagiola took over, and Dick the Bruiser, Lou Thez,
Bobby Valentine, or not Bobby, somebody Valentine.
Cowboy Bob Ellis, Ric Flair.
Ric Flair, I remember that.
Anyway, that's all I got.
Okay.
Was one of the owners of the Chase also a guy who owned a TV station in St. Louis?
KPLR TV, Channel 11 is an independent station. Yep. That's why they carried that station carried the Wrestling at the Chase TV show.
Do you remember the name of the owner or?
Bob. I want to say it was Bob Koppler, Robert Koppler. Now his son is still around, and Channel 11 is still around, but I think the ownership has been.
Koppler also owned, if I'm not mistaken, Lodge of the Four Seasons down at Lake of the Ozarks.
Exactly.
And I worked there for a while in public relations.
Oh.
Yeah. So when Mr. Koppler was still alive. I never got to meet him personally, but I know he came in there a few times.
But he signed your paychecks, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Steppenwolf's Monster. Like I say, we're going to kick off a little run of album discussions, with some kind of relationship or tie into Independence Day. Next week, we're going to talk about John Cougar Mellencamp's Scarecrow, and then the following week will be Neil Young's Freedom. So join us for that. But anyway, Steppenwolf. This is Monster was Steppenwolf's fourth album, released in November 1969. Two singles. They got two singles out of it. The title track, Monster, was the second single. The first single was something called Move Over, which you might remember. This happened after Steppenwolf reached the top 10 and were hugely popular with Born to Be Wild and Magic Carpet Ride. By this time, their singles had kind of started falling into the bottom half of the top 40. So many of us remember them, but a lot of these songs have sort of gone away over time with history. But this was Steppenwolf getting about as political as they got. They would do a few political messages throughout their earlier albums, but they went all in on the protest politics on this one. And this was an album that was suggested by Bob, so I'll turn it over to him.
All right, thank you, Scott. Well, earlier when we were kicking around ideas and we came up with the Americana theme with 4th of July coming up, I came up with a whole bunch of albums because that's, there's just tons of it. And Monster came into my head, and I remember this song back from my youth. So I wanted to do it. And so I came out and I started listening to the album. And this is the first time I've actually listened to it in decades. And you still hear Magic Carpet Ride and Born to Be Wild on, classic rock radio all the time. You don't usually hear much else from Steppenwolf, but they were a solid band that did a lot of good music. And so I've listened to Monster now several times, and I remembered why I liked this album. This is a solid album. It was panned by the critics a lot when it first came out. Rolling Stone did not like it. Robert Christgau of Village Voice, though, did give it praise, but it was panned by the critics. They had a couple songs that went into the top 40, but it was a gold album, so it did sell well. And you're right, this is probably their most overtly political album. The Monster Suite. Monster is actually 3 songs that run for a total of almost 10 minutes. However, they shortened it to about a 3-minute and 50 some odd second song for radio play. So you just heard the first part, which is called Monster, but it's a 3-part suite called Monster, Suicide, and America. And I can say altogether, they total about almost 10 minutes. And the album is dated somewhat, like Draft Resistor is obviously a 60s song. It's about Vietnam, and it starts out with, he was talking about the army as he passed his pipe around, an American deserter who found peace on Swedish ground. You don't get much more 60s than that.
Right.
And the music is of its time, but dang, I still love it. It's got good rock in it. It's got some psychedelia in it. It was really fun to listen to again, which is ironic because it's actually kind of a dark album. It's not lighthearted. It's very political and covers a lot of serious topics. But aside from the politics of the album, I think the music is still great. I was listening to it over and over several times, and I like it. It's good rock and roll. It's got some psychedelia mixed in there. I think John Kay has got a great voice. So I still like this album. Had forgotten about it until we started talking about, doing the 4th of July theme stuff, and it popped into my head. So like I say, I've been listening to it all of this week and have really gotten reacquainted with it, and I think very highly of it.
So Dee, what are your thoughts on the Monster?
I was able to listen to the LP a couple times through the week, and I had not listened to Monster in decades, probably close to I don't know, 35 years or so. And I said, this is, the whole LP is vintage Steppenwolf. And I forgot who had the album back. Somebody in the circle of friends had it, and I listened to it quite a bit then. But the song Monster Particular was their very first, social conscience song. And I enjoyed listening to it. And like Bob, a lot of it is you can still apply today. It started out hopeful, as the history of the nation, made some mistakes. And the one line, I think Bob mentioned it, was I would substitute, rather than the police force watching the people, I would say big tech is watching the people.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, our digital.
Well, big tech kind of is the police force now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother thing, but I think it's relevant for all that. And musically, I think it's a strong album. And Steppenwolf too, they're part of that late 60s, early 70s. You know who they are. They carved out their own brand. There was a couple songs on there. One was a strict instrumental, and I think that was Fag.
Yes.
Yeah, which, I'm sure they were referring to the English term as a cigarette.
Nope.
No. Well, the only reason I said that because John Kay was born in West Germany, and then his family emigrated. So I thought, but then I realized, I said, well, it was, 1969 and what have you. And then there was that one, obviously the one blues number, I think it was the last tune on there, which I wasn't too crazy for, but Move Over, and some of the other songs, I think they're vintage Steppenwolf. And John Kay's voice, immediately identifiable. And hold on, I got somebody trying to, okay. Immediately identifiable, and but his voice is so, I don't want to say quirky, but distinctive. I think that's why it sounded fresh to me after all these years. And I would recommend this LP to somebody that's under the age of 30 if they wanted to get a feel for sort of the late 60s. I know, draft protesters, but this was an LP of its time. And, but yeah, it was a nice revisit, musically. I think it's a good standard rock and roll album for the late 60s. And Monster is my favorite piece on it.
Well,
Unlike you two, I have never stopped listening to Steppenwolf.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I don't listen to them all the time. They're not at the top of my playlist, but yeah, I once or twice a year I'll go in and have myself some Steppenwolf listens. And but this album in particular is probably the most it's the most dated as far as the subject matter is and everything. This when I'm listening to Steppenwolf, this is not the first Steppenwolf album that I turn to, but I think it's pretty solid. It's pretty solid. The last tune, From Here to There Eventually, I love that one. But what makes us stand out besides the subject matter, besides the point that they got so overtly political with this, was, as you saw in the video clip, Steppenwolf employed a female chorus on this album, which is like, that's, I wasn't wild about it. I know on the, one of the things about Steppenwolf that I love listening to their albums is on all their albums up to this one, the drummer Jerry Edmonton would take some lead vocals now and then, and I loved his voice. It was great. And then from Steppenwolf 7, the next album, through For Ladies Only, which was the last album that they made before they dissolved and started reforming in different things and everything. But they added a new guitar player named Biondo, I forget his first name, but he took over the secondary lead vocal chores on that. But that's for me to get there. And the song From Here to There Eventually, you hear that female chorus come in and do that. On the live album, on the Steppenwolf live album, which came out right after this one, when they do this song, Jerry Edmonton does the vocal parts that on this album the female vocalists do, and I like it a lot better when on the live album when Edmonton does those secondary vocals. Anyway, Steppenwolf's great. They were huge back then. They were past their peak. This was a little bit past. They were on the downside on their commercial. They'd passed their commercial peak by this time. This was really the start of the decline commercially. I would suggest that this album, the next album, Steppenwolf 7, might have been their peak artistically, but commercially they were starting to slip here a little bit. It's solid Steppenwolf. They did a few things. They tried a few things on this that I think for the most part worked, but it's still solid Steppenwolf. You can't go wrong with this. You know, my thing. If my favorite Steppenwolf album is actually the next one, Steppenwolf 7, and my second favorite Steppenwolf album is the one before this called At Your Birthday Party. Good stuff, great stuff. Yeah. And when Bob suggested we talk about this, I was thrilled. I was thrilled to go in and give me an excuse to spend a week listening to some Steppenwolf again.
Well, the Steppenwolf live album was one of the first 3 albums that I ever bought. And I bought Steppenwolf Live, Grand Funk Live, and Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant, used from a kid in high school. So, and I still have all 3 of those albums. So I've always liked Steppenwolf. It just kind of, you know, other than what would come on classic rock radio, and I've got Steppenwolf Live and one of my iPods that whenever I'm traveling, it'll pop up, you know, when I do shuffling songs and stuff. But yeah, I after I listened to it, I was like, I've got to put them back in my rotation more often. The instrumental called Fag, interestingly, in Apple Music, that title has F''G. So, you know,
asterisk F asterisk G.
Yeah. So, you know, they're bowing to the times. Right. And I kind of wondered about it. So my research, supposedly the band member who wrote that instrumental piece wrote it after being hit on by several gays. And supposedly the music is supposed to mimic the way he thinks gays walk. So I don't know if that's true or not. That's what I supposedly found.
Now, according to this, George Biondo is the guitar player, or is the bass player that joined him after this. It took over the secondary. I just, for the record, I just threw that in. But anyway, Fag, there's actually 3 co-writers on Fag. It's Larry Byram, the lead guitar player, Jerry Edmonton, the drummer, and Nick St. Nicholas, who was the bassist. So yeah, I'd be interested to know which one of those did this. Steppenwolf it's an interesting story if you follow the overall story of them. Steppenwolf was all, and it still is. Steppenwolf was all about John Kay. He was the front man. He was the leader. And from what I, you know, just little biographical pieces that I read now and then about Steppenwolf, that John Kay was the boss. You know, he was a tyrant of a leader in Steppenwolf, and they ran through guitar players and they ran through bass players like crazy. They kept coming and going, and mostly because John Kay didn't like somebody or got mad at them or something, and so he told them to hit the road. Through 1970, through For Ladies Only, which came out in 1972, I believe, the band, there were three core members of the band: John Kay, Jerry Edmonton, the drummer, and Goldie McJohn, the organ player. When they reformed in the in 72 and 73, Goldie McJohn came back, but it was soon after that where McJohn was gone and Edmonton was gone, and from about every version of Steppenwolf from about 1978 on has been John Kay and a bunch of pickup musicians. none of the other original guys have been there since about the early 80s. So it's all John Kay.
Which is interesting. Like, I think Born to Be Wild, which, you know, is obviously their most recognizable song, was actually written by a guy named Mars Bonfire, wasn't it?
Mars Bonfire was actually Dennis Edmonton, who was Jerry Edmonton's brother.
Okay.
And he was the original bass player, I believe.
Yeah.
But Kay, I just saw an interview with Kay on YouTube where he was talking about Born to Be Wild, and he actually sent Mars Bonfire packing because Bonfire wrote a song for the second album that he tried to replicate Born to Be Wild, and Kay got offended by it and didn't like it, thought that he was selling out and trying to and wasn't being artistic enough, so Kay told him to hit the road.
You know,
it was the opening track on the second called Something at the Speed of Light. And Dennis Edmonton actually sang the lead on that song because Kay refused to sing it.
Yeah, I wonder that with Born to Be Wild, which was, of course, their biggest, most recognizable hit, and it also became part of the lexicon.
Right.
You know, I think it was sort of the unofficial song for motorcycle gangs. You know?
Well, yeah, because of Easy Rider, it was on the Easy Rider soundtrack, and Kay said that gave that song its legs. And it was a hit. It was a hit, and they had a hit with it and everything like that. But when it appeared a year later in the Easy Rider soundtrack, that's when it got its legs. And that's the first use that anybody knows of the term heavy metal. Right?
I believe that is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wouldn't. Nobody calls it a heavy metal song, but as far as anybody can tell, the lineage of the term heavy metal starts with and Born to Be Wild.
Really,
yeah.
To me, it's just vintage, high energy rock and roll.
Right.
The ultimate road song.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's the kind of song as you're on the ramp and you're getting ready to get on the interstate. It's either that or
you turn the volume up to 11 and mash your foot on the gas pedal.
They also had a monster hit with Magic Carpet Ride from the second album.
Yes.
But that was, I think both of those records got to #1. And Magic Carpet Ride, Born to Be Wild is the most famous song, here, 50 years later. But Magic Carpet Ride is still right up there in the Steppenwolf lexicon. It was after that, like I say, after that they started. They released several hit singles over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. But now we're talking about songs that would get and reach number 32 and 33, and they weren't getting in the top 10 anymore after those two songs.
Magic Carpet Ride has got an interesting little backstory because it starts out, I like to dream, yes, yes, right between the sound machine on a cloud of sound, I drift in the night. And Kay says he wrote that song because in his bedroom, he had this new sound system. And the speakers were on either side of the head of the bed. So he would lie there in bed listening to music. and the bed became the magic carpet ride, and the sound machine, was the stereo system. So I thought that was kind of an interesting.
Well, the production of that song, and this is what. Whoops, sorry about that. This is one of the early things that where they really used the stereo separation and the phasing to go back and forth from left to right and go through your ears, and what probably it could be seriously one of the very first true headphone songs.
Yeah. Well, when I first heard the song way back in the day, I initially thought it was a drug song, but then when I finally read the interview with him where he talked about it was just lying in bed listening to music, really changed my perspective on the song. But a couple trivia things. Steppenwolf as a band officially ended their performances in 2018 out at the Baxter Springs, Kansas outdoor amphitheater here in the metro area. Kay still comes out and performs, but as an official band, that was their very last concert. And then what I've always found really interesting is when John Kay started doing solo albums, he went country. And,
yes, I remember that. Yeah.
So, and I mean, he even did like the old truck song, Moving On, and so he went folk and country when he went solo, which I never would have guessed listening to the music that he did with the band.
Yeah, I'm looking. They were active 67 to 72. That was their classic, the peak years, and then 74 to 76 was the second incarnation of Steppenwolf, and I believe Goldie McJohn was part of that, and then they were active from 1980 to 2018, 38 years, but as far as I could tell, that 1980 to 2018 was basically a John Kay nostalgia act.
Yeah.
they released a few albums, but none of them did anything. And the few videos that I find of them from that period, from the 80s into the 90s and up till a couple of years ago, all the videos I can find are Monster, Magic Carpet Ride, Born to Be Wild. I can't find many videos of them doing anything besides the hits.
I'm surprised they didn't get into a legal hassle with John Kay. If it's a totally new lineup.
Well, I'm sure. Well, knowing what and a lot of what I've read in the last week, just going through and to catch up on this, is that like I say, John Kay was the tyrant ruler. So I'm sure that John Kay, from the very beginning, was the owner of that band name.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think they were able to extend out their career by keying in on what Dan said about Born to Be Wild being a biker song. I know they played a lot of biker festivals, and I think they spent a lot of time at Sturgis.
Oh, sure. Well, that's their anthem.
Yeah,
that's their. It still is. It still is.
One thing too, since we mentioned a couple little trivias about Steppenwolf on Steppenwolf 7. Which it didn't have the big sales, but the one song on there that I always liked, and they did a cover of a country western song written by Hoyt Axton, Snowblind Friend.
Oh, yeah.
I always liked that. And they didn't do very many covers, but then they decided to do Hoyt Axton, and I heard Hoyt Axton's original, and it was like a straight country song, but our style. And but yeah, that was I think they're probably their best cover of
wait a minute. I'm gonna stop and argue with you on that. I love Snowblind Friend from Steppenwolf 7, but no, that wasn't their best cover. That wasn't even their best cover of a Hoyt Axton song. For their first album, their first single was a cover of a Hoyt Axton song, The Pusher.
You're right.
Axton wrote that song?
Yeah.
You're right, Scott. My 40 years of memory. You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
That was our second cover of a Hoyt Axton song.
I always thought that was an original song.
You are correct, sir. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And Karina.
No, they did. They
Karina
didn't do. They didn't do many covers. They they did. They did. They would do like one cover on, one cover per album. Actually, I'm looking at Steppenwolf 7, and they do 2 covers on that one. 40 Days and 40 Nights is a cover written by somebody named Bernie Roth. I don't know who that is. Anyway, that's just trivia. Going back to Monster. I always thought that was in 1969, and of course in 1969, prog rock really wasn't a thing yet. You had sort of the proto prog back in those days with like the Canterbury scene and the real heavy psychedelic music. But I always considered Monster as an early, the Sweet as an early prog rocker, as well as 2 years later in 1971, still early in that game, the title track for Ladies Only, which was a 9-minute opus that was edited down to a single, actually. But that was also an early attempt at prog. I thought. I've always thought of that.
Good point.
Because of all the times, the shifts in time signatures and the different, it's almost like different songs put together into different song fragments put together into one piece.
Well, when I was re-listening to the album, I picked up on the fact that it wasn't just straight ahead rock and roll. That there were some elements, I think, of psychedelia in there and some other flourishes that they put in.
Right.
So yeah.
And prog actually grew out of that out of that corner of the psychedelia scene.
And I also fondly remember "Don't Step on the Grass."
Yeah, that was from the first album, right?
Yeah.
The first or the second one, yeah. Don't Step on the Grass, Sam.
Yeah.
I mean, they would get political a little bit, but mostly most of the social commentary they were doing before Monster was mostly about it wasn't so much political as it was they were getting something like "Don't Step on the Grass," Sam, was basically a pro marijuana song.
Yes.
And the pusher was actually it was actually a pro marijuana song too, because it was a song that was saying, it says, hey, if you want to go sit around and smoke a little pot and everything, more power to you, but
stay out the hard stuff.
Stay away from that pusher, man.
And well, the pusher was on the Easy Rider soundtrack too, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. It might have been, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure it was.
I saw an interview with Kay this week too, where he's talking about the pusher that he was talking about back, and that was from their first album back when they were going. They would actually go into concert venues, and the promoters and the owners of the venue would come up to them and tell them they could not sing that song, "The Pusher," and it wasn't because of the content of the lyrics, but it was because they could not stand up on stage and say, "God damn the pusher, man."
Which is stupid.
So Kay said that after a while, after a few times where they were told they couldn't sing that song, all of a sudden he got the idea, and so they started doing the song, but they were allowed to do the song only if they promised to not use that term "God damn." So that instead of going "God damn the pusher, man," they'd go "the pusher, man." They just skip a beat and not say anything. Yeah.
But it's not taking God's name in vain.
Well, that's what people.
I know, but you're asking God to
Those-
damn or punish dealers.
Those are the kind of things that offended people in the
Yeah, I
mid
know.
and late 60s. You know.
So did
Okay.
that, out of just real quick curiosity, did they edit that out when that song went on the radio? Does anybody remember?
You know, I don't know. It was released as a single, but it wasn't a successful single.
Maybe they just edited. They kept damn the Pusher Man. They dropped got it. I
Possibly.
thought.
I really don't remember. I mean,
I don't remember.
I was just
I don't remember what I
a
heard on the
kid
radio.
I was just a kid of 12 or 13. So I don't remember that.
So I don't. I may never even heard it on the radio. I just may know it from the albums. But
It was real. Let me see if I could find this real quick. The pusher. Hoyt Axton, 5 minutes and 43 seconds. Yep, it was an easy rider. It actually they were actually doing that song when they were the Sparrows before they formed Steppenwolf, according to this. Hoyt Axton never put it on any of his albums. I don't know, that question is not answered in this Wikipedia page, so I'm not sure. Yeah, but it was released as a single, and it never went anywhere. Anything else on Steppenwolf?
I think we beat this one to death.
Okay. Do you have anything to add?
No, just they definitely earned their niche in the late 60s, and I think their legacy will carry on. You can't mention late 60s rock music with Steppenwolf. They're just part of it.
They were hugely popular, and they were hugely influential.
As long as classic rock radio is a thing, you'll hear "Born to Be Wild."
Right. Yep. And they were around. They were doing this stuff before FM radio was a thing. So their really entree into the mainstream was through top 40 radio, and they clicked on a couple of things, and it made them huge. It made them huge. They were huge.
Yeah, I read somewhere that Monster might have also been an attempt to break more into FM radio.
Well, that was about the dawn of FM radio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the timing, it all converged, and it very well could have been. Because they were, like I said, their singles. They were still releasing singles, but they were now falling into the bottom half of the top 40. But at the same time, now they were getting album cuts on FM radio, which was just beginning to become a thing. So they really kind of bridged that.
And FM would push concert sales and album sales. And even though there weren't really any necessarily hit singles off this album, it still went gold. So it sold well.
Oh yeah. Their album sold very well. Album sold very well. And yeah, part of that was because they were one of the first big, huge bands on FM radio, on FM album radio. Okay. Well, let's wrap it up for the week. Next week, come on back. We're going to talk about John Cougar Mellencamp's ROCK in the USA on his Scarecrow album, which was a big album for him. Right.
Actually, I think. Well, whatever. I'll save that for
now. Well, actually, he's an actual middle-class Midwesterner.
Yeah, I think
I like Mellencamp.
He was a real deal.
Yeah, I think Mellencamp is a genuine. He's a genuine guy, an artist. I
like Mellencamp.
He's an original of what Springsteen turned into, right?
Yeah, and
okay, but we can. But that's a discussion for next.
Well, it is. Springsteen came from a small town in New Jersey, but I think, even if it's a small town, it's still part of one huge metro. So,
Right. They're like 20 minutes from New York City or
yeah,
something.
so not exactly the middle of nowhere.
John
No.
Cougar Mellencamp was 20 minutes from Indianapolis. Yeah.
Yeah, but still 20 minutes from Indianapolis is the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
as far
well,
as
there
I'm
you go.
concerned.
That's kind of my point.
If you've ever been to Indiana, you know what I'm talking about.
All right, so John Cougar Mellencamp next week, Neil Young the following week, and we'll go ahead. And then the following week after that, we're planning on a discussion of the Beatles' "Let It Be" and Peter Jackson's new movie coming out. So that's all coming up in the next few weeks. Check us out at geezerology.com. Give us a like, please subscribe, and we'll see you next week, everybody. So,
All right.
Hey.
Peace out. Take care.